Okay, so if I'm streaming it on another link, it's actually fine.
Okay. So Jacob, do you have a connection to Oliver Popovich?
Yep, he's texting me right now. I can direct people that are on the YouTube link currently to that stream, Ishan, and have Oliver redirect the link on the website.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, I'm sending you the link because this one actually works.
Great.
Thank you.
And yeah, let's rock and roll.
All right. Wonderful.
So Pierre,
Sorry about that. I have no idea what happened. Jacob, I've sent you the link. It's on Slack, the second one, not the first one I sent you.
Got it. All right. Anya, do you have the ability to text me if necessary?
I don't. I'm using my phone as a speaker and it's far away from me.
Okay, no problem.
What's another way for us to communicate? Email.
Just yell into the void.
Yeah, okay. I'll try that. I'm very good at that.
And Jacob, you can just put yourself on mute on Zoom and just check if the audio and everything on YouTube is working.
Yes, all good on the Zoom or on the YouTube, I mean. Okay. And I'll redirect people in the chat now and talk to Oliver.
Okay, and I can tell everyone, I mean, you just once I can tell everyone when there's enough viewers on this.
Natalie, if you could give Jacob the language to redirect in French as well. Yes. Everyone's going to be very constant. Please do.
If anyone needs this link to send out, I'm sending it in the chat. That's the link where everyone's going.
Jacob, Ishan, I don't think you can paste a link through the YouTube chat. We can see that you commented there, but we cannot see the link.
Okay.
I confirm there is no link in the chat.
Do they prevent sending links in the chat?
I guess yes, because of the privacy issues.
Let me see if I can send it.
I can try also. I've sent the link. Do you see it?
No.
No, okay.
Oh, I can't go into the other chat because I'm all streaming on the other link.
There. Oh man, of course this is.
Can you drop the website and ask people to revisit the website to reconnect?
Yes, but it takes a second to. It's not immediate.
You can just tell everyone to go back to the website. Has the website been updated with the new link?
No.
That's what I'm saying. It's not an immediate
Okay.
shift.
Can you spell the website?
We have 5 viewers right now watching this. So,
There are 24 waiting.
Yeah.
Can you see what I just
go.
We're
This is
gonna
great
see the screen.
because he's not there yet.
Okay.
Okay, so you're live now.
We're live now,
I mean, you're off mute basically.
but great. And we're rolling.
Good morning.
Okay. And Ishan, we no longer see the connection to YouTube.
Yeah, just give me a sec.
Great.
Great.
Here we are. We're all together, and we're going to thank everyone in the audience for your patience and for your goodwill and for your belief that in the end, human beings can maybe conquer technology, however briefly and with however much sweat and tears and labor. Thank you all for joining us for this unprecedented launch of the Acts of Urbanism project, which is both an experiment in transnational collaboration and a digital platform to research, discuss, and consider the intersection of the arts, performing arts, urbanism, design, and urban design. And to figure out if collectively, through collaboration and experimentation, we might come up with a new set of critical tools for the interpretation and the reimagination of cities. So we launched the project about a year ago with a number of partners from France and from the United States. And today is the very first day that we're attempting to work together live at the Grenoble Biennale to test how we might all coexist in virtual space to address some of the pressing issues of how cities are made. So without further ado, I wanted to just introduce the partners in this project, which are many. We have brought together through the Acts of Urbanism project, the University of Grenoble-Alpes, the Laboratoire Pacte, La Cité du Design Saint-Étienne, Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning at the University of Michigan, Le Pacifique, CDCN Grenoble, Auvergne-du-Rhône-Alpes, Coaqui in Detroit. And this program today is made possible with support from the French Embassy in Chicago, the Institut Français, and with support of the FACE Foundation and their Transitioning to Virtual Exchange Fund. And that's a mouthful. And we are currently in a digital cave, a kind of platonic wink at the possibility of trying to unpack modes of contemporary representation and how they inflect our understanding of ourselves in space and within cities. To give you a little bit of more information about how this platform works, you can see that you can click and drag to visit with the speakers and participants in this conversation today, but you can also call in. We have Jacob Commercy that's inhabiting a pink flip phone where he can answer your questions and connect you and wire you into this cave in English. And Mahmoud Al-Said is playing the role of the French pink telephone, which you can also call to discuss any of the issues on the table today in French. And in the YouTube channel, Jacob and Mahmoud will drop the telephone numbers. Please feel free to dial in to discuss and to participate, as well as to use the YouTube chat. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to my friend and colleague, Jennifer Bouygues, who's in Grenoble, but also in the cave, to introduce this project in French. Jennifer?
Merci, Anya. Nous sommes le 3 avril 2021. Il est 3 heures de l'après-midi à Grenoble. Nous sommes un peu en retard. Il est 9 heures du matin à Détroit et nous sommes en direct de la Biennale des villes en transition édition 2021. Et nous sommes ensemble pour 2 heures dans cette étrange caverne. Mesdames, Messieurs, Ladies and Gentlemen, bienvenue. Cette 3e édition de la Biennale, qui se tient du 1er au 4 avril, nous invite à échanger, à réfléchir ensemble autour d'un fil rouge thématique. Et il tient en un mot, il se nomme l'essentiel. L'essentiel, un de ces nouveaux mots entrés dans notre vocabulaire de citoyens, de citoyennes, empêchés par la pandémie. Aujourd'hui, ce mot, nous allons le faire résonner dans le champ des arts et de la culture, et ce, au moment précisément où les musées, comme les salles de spectacle, sont fermés, voire occupés. L'art, la culture, la performance considérés comme non essentiels. Ce temps en suspension témoin d'une époque et le contexte dans lequel nous avons lancé le projet de recherche dont parlait Anya, qui s'intitule « Entre actes d'urbanisme » et en anglais « Act of Urbanism ». Il s'agit d'une recherche expérimentale à l'intersection entre art, design, performance et urbanisme, qui prend exactement le contre-pied de l'esprit des lois. L'art, la performance dans la ville sont observés dans ce qu'ils sont justement essentiels. L'essentiel est ce qui donne sens. Ce programme de recherche, porté par différents partenaires, Université Grenoble-Alpes, Laboratoire Parc, Cité du Design, le Todd College of Architecture and Urban Planning à l'Université du Michigan, le Pacifique et Akaoki à Détroit. Tout ceci ne pourrait avoir lieu sans le soutien de l'ambassade de France à Chicago, l'Institut français et la Fondation FACE. Nous sommes dans une caverne, donc, et vous l'avez compris, il y a un chat. Dans ce chat, vous avez 2 numéros de téléphone. N'hésitez pas à appeler et nous prendrons vos messages. So, ring the bell. Peut-être, pour commencer, Jean-Michel, quelques mots sur les villes qui nous rejoignent. Jean-Michel?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Anya. I'm really pleased to introduce you to 2 of the cities that are part of the project, Grenoble, that was mentioned, but also Saint-Étienne. You know Detroit, so I will focus maybe on the 2 French cities. Edge of nowhere, well, almost. It is located on the margin of the Central Void, Le Massif Central, in a remote valley in which, if you dig deep enough, you will find coals and irons and industrious farmers, something like the Appalachians. These farmers and craftsmen built one of the top 6 largest towns of France in the 19th century, with over 220,000 inhabitants. A town, not a city, in the British acception. Saint-Étienne had to wait the beginning of its decline in the late 1960s to get a university and a cathedral. In the Golden Age, Saint-Étienne was a booming town with a reputation for its coal, iron and steels, weapons and silk ribbons. The first railway line of the country was bringing the goods to Paris and Lyon. The rivers were bringing the guns to the fleet of Toulon and Saint-Nazaire. The arts were few, except those having a purpose. The town has renowned schools of design for the need of the silk merchant and weapon manufacturers. Artists were in charge of imagining the next fashion for silk and woven pictures or carving the steels and wood of the hunting rifles. The economic decline arrived at the same time for all the industries and mining. Saint-Étienne has lost 40,000 inhabitants, but remain an industrial town. Local people built a strategy of revivals based upon the idea that they were not making industrial product, but industrial design. Around this weird storytelling, a Biennale of design was set. The Museum of Art and Industry has been refurbished. A design center was created. Urbanists invited artists to redesign public square, and young artists decided to settle here. It is now a UNESCO design city and still one of the poorest cities in France. Grenoble, although being in the same region, is a very different city. Grenoble, like Detroit, pretends to be a pioneer city, a city of tomorrow, la ville de demain. Well, as a matter of fact, the place has been funded by a migrant tribe of Celts looking for a better future in the valley at confluences of rivers surrounded by mountains. Later, some legionnaires built a bridge that became a full city and then under the Roman Emperor. The city made its business being on the frontier of the kingdom for a long time and for making gloves of the wild animals' fur, beavers included. At the end of the 19th century, the cities conquered the high mountains around and converted the waterfalls into electricity and the snow into tourism. The white coal, electricity, developed a steel-based and energy industry, later turning to nuclear energy. The alliance of municipality, university, and industry is often presented as the golden link for making the city always a step forward the rest of the country. Always keen to promote its uniqueness and creativity, Grenoble owes to the state its massive boom of the post-war. The cities multiplied its population per 4 during the 50s and 60s, with the attribution of a major nuclear research center, a full-scale university, and the 1968 Olympic Winter Games. Grenoble welcomed also one of the largest maisons de la culture. The decline of the traditional industries has been hidden by the development of the research and high-tech industries. The municipality, with the first green mayor of France, is promoting new policies of mobility, cycling, urban farming, and cultures, with an S, with a fast-growing street art festival and a Biennale of cities in transitions. The open-minded engineers going to work on its bicycle is the main figure of the city, hiding the social-spatial division of a city between a wealthy city center and deprived suburbs.
Okay, thank you, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jean-Michel and Jennifer. And just before we transition to our first conversation, I wanted to take a brief moment to introduce the Detroit participants in this cave. My name is Anya Sirota, and this is Jean-Louis Farge. We're co-principals of Akoaki, a Detroit-based architecture and urban design firm, and I also teach at the University of Michigan's Taubman College. In this cave from Detroit, and these are very brief introductions, and the work of these artists deserves a whole lot more time and space. And we invite you to discover some of their work and their biographies and their thinking on the virtual website, on the virtual digital institution that helped us enter into this cave. But first, Shireen Azab is the co-director of the Detroit-based theater ensemble, A Host of People. She's just raised her hand. She's a director, producer, educator that has worked nationally and internationally in cities such as Detroit, Seattle, New York, and Berlin, and she holds a BFA from Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle and a postgraduate certificate from the Institute of Curatorial Practice and Performance in Wesleyan University. And she is partnered with Jake Hooker, who is a co-director of the Host of People project, also a writer, director, projection designer, scholar, educator. He works at the University of Michigan at the School of Performing Arts. And with A Host of People, he works with a range from generating texts to including poems, designing and creating video projections, technology, dramaturgy, co-direction, and even occasionally performing. He has extraordinary levels of experience from Berlin to New York City, across the US and beyond, and we're delighted that he's with us. Also, Billy Mark, an interdisciplinary artist who lives and works in Detroit. He's married to the fiber artist, Sarah Mark. They have a lovely relationship, obviously. And his areas of exploration lately have been embodied poetics, experimental liturgies, site-specific music and poetry, and the creative and spiritual resources found in monasticism. Gina Reichart, she's sitting on a rock near our friends from Grenoble. And she's an artist, architect, and a community developer like no other. She is the co-director of Powerhouse Productions. Her practice is deeply rooted in developing new strategies and ideas for intervention and self-initiated projects in her immediate Detroit neighborhood. She deals with principles of inclusion, radical art practice, building networks of artists to imagine novel and adaptive futures for neighborhoods at the city scale. Emily Rogers, she's sitting in front of the rock where Gina and our friends from Grenoble are. And she is an interdisciplinary artist, producer, songwriter, musician, dancer, choreographer, event curator, music director, host, and DJ, all of that. And she's also a Detroit native, an accomplished band leader with powerful stage presence, being nominated for the Detroit Music Awards. There are the number of people she has worked with is innumerable and extraordinary. Among them, Underground Resistance, Jessica Caremore, Royce Duff, 5'9", okay,
Yes.
Royce. So an extraordinary artist in her own right. And I'm going to take a moment also to introduce Pierre Lombla. While he's not a Detroit-based artist, he's actually from Vendôme. He has worked closely with artists in Detroit and is a saxophonist and multi-instrumentalist, a performing artist, a composer, next generation of home studio inventor, and his experiences have spread from stages in concert halls, theaters, laboratories, popular music venues, but also experiments in oral tradition and experimentation in the urban realm. The folks that I've just introduced, and Pierre Lombla soon adapting to the Detroit scene, what brings them together in particular is that they fold, they diminish and blur the binary opposition between artists and residents, taking on full responsibility and action in the urban realm, which no longer posits community engagement as a responsibility of the artist, but embeds that work in the very essence and being of the creative individual. So we'll get more into those details. And I count on our friends and colleagues from Detroit to tell the story of their perception of the city in ways that I would not be able to accommodate. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer to introduce the artists from France and to take us into the first conversation.
Merci Anya, merci bien. Je vais parler des artistes français qui sont parmi nous aujourd'hui. Il y a Gabriel Boulanger qui est à mes côtés, qui vit et travaille en France, plus particulièrement dans la métropole de Grenoble, après des aventures dans différents collectifs d'art vivant, notamment les Mauvaises Herbes, mais aussi le collectif Archéologie. Gabriel mène depuis 2016 un travail dans le musée du temps libre. Ces projets de micro-urbanisme partagés se situent entre les arts, les sciences sociales, l'urbanisme et l'architecture. Elle est boursière des arts plastiques de la ville de Grenoble en 2018, les artistes associés au magasin, qui est le Centre national d'art contemporain, situé à Grenoble. Et Gabriel œuvre au quotidien, au cœur des quartiers, à la fabrique d'espaces relationnels. Il y a Catalina Insignares, n'hésitez pas à faire un signe de la main. Catalina, vous êtes chorégraphe, vous êtes danseuse colombienne et basée à Paris. Votre pratique comprend des duos, notamment avec un participant pendant quelques semaines, une lecture nocturne adressée aux corps endormis et des pratiques sensorielles qui tentent d'écouter les morts. Depuis 2017, vous travaillez avec Myriam Lefkowitz en tant que performeuse et également dans une collaboration qui cherche à infiltrer les pratiques sensorielles et ce, dans divers contextes sociaux, la facultade. Et c'est dans ce cadre que Catalina a récemment séjourné dans le quartier de l'Abbaye à Grenoble. Myriam Lefkowitz, petit signe de la main. Merci. En tant que chorégraphe, les recherches de Myriam Lefkowitz se concentrent depuis 2010 sur les questions d'attention et de perception à travers différents dispositifs immersifs impliquant des relations directes entre spectateurs, spectatrices et artistes. Elle a présenté ses travaux dans différentes biennales, la Biennale de Venise, mais parmi d'autres. Elle est régulièrement invitée pour des workshops, elle enseigne donc en parallèle. Entre 2017 et 2018, elle a reçu une commande de « If I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution ». Elle travaille actuellement dans un film en collaboration avec l'artiste Simon Roppel-Hurier. Elle enseigne, je le disais tout à l'heure, à Angers. Et donc, elle est invitée à différents endroits, au Kunstzentrum de Bouddha, mais aussi à Grenoble, par le Pacifique, le centre chorégraphique. Toujours à propos de la chorégraphie, nous avons avec nous Mathieu Hérault. Mathieu Hérault est installé à Saint-Étienne. Il est chorégraphe, donc, performeur, improvisateur, pédagogue. Il a investi depuis 2016 une vitrine à Saint-Étienne. Cela s'appelle le magasin. laboratoire de performance chorégraphique dans le centre-ville de Saint-Étienne. Il s'agit d'un ancien magasin avec une vitrine où il expérimente l'art au quotidien comme un service culturel de proximité. Il collabore quotidiennement avec de nombreux artistes, des penseurs, des penseuses, travaillant sur la plasticité de sa pratique, le déploiement de son écriture et la recherche en improvisation. Hélène Irache, vous êtes là, n'hésitez pas à faire un signe. Vous êtes chorégraphe, danseuse. Vous avez un parcours qui a, je crois, commencé à l'Académie de danse de Toulouse, mais vous êtes aussi passé par New York pour étudier au studio de Merce Cunningham. Depuis 2004, vous avez créé de nombreux spectacles, que ce soit en duo, en solo ou en quatuor. Avec l'artiste Delphine Coindé, vous avez été invité à créer des performances in situ. Vous interprétez aussi de nombreuses chorégraphies, de chorégraphes tout aussi variés. Et vous avez collaboré avec divers artistes. Vous avez aussi suivi la formation du sociologue Bruno Latour en 2016 à Sciences Po Paris. Dan Charles Dahan, merci de nous faire signe aussi pour que tout le monde puisse vous identifier. Vous développez une pratique artistique centrée sur le son. Dans votre travail, vous évoluez entre l'art sonore, la musique acoustique, la musique improvisée, le mixage expérimental, les pièces d'art radiophonique, le paysage sonore, le design sonore. De concert en concert, vous avez forgé une expérience approfondie de la musique live, à la fois vivante et spontanée. Vos pratiques, qui n'ont de cesse d'évoluer, de s'enrichir au fil des rencontres et des projets innovants, ont donné naissance à un univers musical personnel et à la fois une approche unique de la matière sonore. Merci à toutes, merci à tous pour la participation à ce débat. Un débat qui se déroule en 3 temps et qui commence maintenant. Ce premier temps, lequel est-il? Saint-Étienne, Grenoble, Détroit. Saint-Étienne, Grenoble and Detroit are mono-industrial cities. They are postmodern ones. They are highly political cities. Their history are related to the history of rock, but also to the history of resistance. How the context of the city is in relation with the work of the artist here present in this cave. Quelle est la relation entre le contexte de ces villes, ce contexte chargé d'histoire, mono-industriel, postmoderne, politique, et le travail de ces artistes ici présents dans cette cave? Gina, je vais vous poser une question. So Gina, could we speak together about your relation between the context and your work? What is the specific relation to Detroit into your work? What is the approach? Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, for us, my work here in Detroit really came about from living in the neighborhood first. So I feel like I put the role of neighborhood resident and citizen of Detroit, if I might say so, kind of came before any of the work, and the work grew out of being very aware of place and very aware of my neighbors and the neighborhood that I was living in. And the work kind of developed by putting myself and the activities of a studio in unusual circumstances. So whether it was a storefront, kind of a retail storefront that invited anyone and everyone to walk in the door and talk to a designer, whether you were looking for services or a product to buy, it became a very common and everyday experience. And I think that work from the storefront space that was called Design 99 really moved into the everyday walking and talking around the neighborhood. So it meant collecting objects from the neighborhood. It meant the studio door was open, and that kind of everyday presence where there was no barrier of accessibility to me as an artist, to my studio space, to some of the partners I worked with, whether they were also neighborhood residents or they were coming from another city or across the world. It was really about not just asking residents to engage us, but it was us opening up our practice outside of a typical like the mystery of behind the door of the artist working in the studio. And I think from that, it became more public projects. So I think the biggest example is the skate park that's down the street, Ride It Sculpture Park. And with Ride It Sculpture Park, there really is no barrier of entry. It's open 24/7, even though it's technically dawn to dusk, but there's no closure. There's no door that gets locked or unlocked. There's no, it's sort of, the best example of the commons that we've created, because it really is a self-regulated space that, that both is open, but the responsibility is borne by the people who use it and tend to it. And so whether you're an artist that we've commissioned to make a sculpture like Neri Ward, or you're an artist who lives closer to the place itself, to the park, who shows up and wants to spray paint on whatever surface they deem worthy, all of those practices are collapsed in one space. And so there's really, it's not about hierarchy, and it's not about control, and it was a lot about us learning to let go.
Merci, Gina. Thank you very much, Gina. Thank you very much. Hélène from Saint-Étienne, Hélène de Saint-Étienne, je voudrais te poser la même question. Comment tu pourrais qualifier le contexte dans lequel tu travailles, ou en tout cas cette relation au contexte, cette relation à la ville de Saint-Étienne? Hélène, just a few words in English. Is it possible for you to explain the relation in between your work and the context in Saint-Étienne?
Yes, I can try, but in fact, the relation between my work and the context is very new, because it's been 2 years I'm living in Saint-Étienne, and since then I was really working in a very traditional, closed theater or dance studio, and it's really thanks to Mathieu and to Le Magasin that I started to be in another place, which is a vitrine. You can't see here, but we are really in the street right now. We are really seeing people, and people are seeing us. And so maybe can I give la parole to Mathieu, because he can explain his way of thinking and activating the magasin. It's okay for you?
Oh, feel free.
Bonjour, je vais parler en français. Mais le magasin, en fait, c'est un espace, comme le disait Hélène, avec une vitrine. C'est un contexte particulier de la ville de Saint-Étienne, mais qui est aussi particulier à plusieurs villes françaises. C'est qu'il y a beaucoup de magasins, de vitrines vides, de rez-de-chaussée vacants, qui ont été désertés par le commerce de proximité et du coup qui n'ont plus d'utilité et d'usage. En tout cas, cet usage est perdu, ou c'est des espaces un peu troués. Et il y a quelques années, du coup, j'avais envie d'essayer de confronter la danse et ma pratique à un espace qui sera en direct avec le public. Et du coup, dans ce contexte-là, aussi l'idée de travailler avec d'autres danseurs et chorégraphes pour donner une visibilité directe au corps dans la ville et au corps dansant en particulier. Et donc, c'est comme ça qu'on s'est rencontrés avec Hélène quand elle est arrivée à Saint-Étienne. Moi, je suis originaire de Saint-Étienne. Et puis c'est aussi comme ça qu'on s'est rencontrés avec Dan. C'est par ce lieu qui est aussi à la fois un lieu de rencontre pour les artistes, mais aussi un lieu où les gens, les habitants, les passants, les visiteurs, les spectateurs peuvent venir croiser le travail d'artistes et échanger autour de leurs recherches. Voilà un peu rapidement un paysage du magasin à Saint-Étienne.
Merci Hélène, merci beaucoup Mathieu. Je voudrais poser la même question, c'est-à-dire celle de la relation au contexte. Je voudrais la poser à Pierre Lombla. Pierre Lombla, is it possible for you to say something about your relation to your context, your environmental context? I think it's a rural one in Vendôme, isn't it?
Pierre? Piero?
Yes. So of course I can. It is something very specific here because all the cities we were talking about are highly industrial places, and Vendôme indeed didn't make any industrial revolution at all. So it's just kept its dimension without any 19th century explosion like Le Mans did just a few kilometers from here. And this is very specific. So the place has been, is still a highly cultural place, but only a very small town with only like less than 20,000 inhabitants, and many rural places. So what we are trying to do here is to bring the, like we have been building, for example, a little jazz festival, who is like a caravan going from every little village so we are playing all around Vendôme in the villages, directly closer to the audience and everything, and that is very important, because indeed, though it's such a rural place, there's still a highly woven society, and people exchanging much, and this is very specific to this place, which has not been dropped in industry or anything like that. So it's very it's like a curiosity indeed.
Can I say something, Jennifer? Well, I think I love just that it's such a simple phrase, but closer to the audience. I think that and the idea of like taking the work to the audience instead of asking the audience to come to you is like the strongest gesture.
Yes, indeed. And well, we are also building, trying to build like experimental art schools in the village I'm living in, La Rochette. So like having a tool which is both open to creators and also very open to transmission and intergenerational transmission indeed, because when we make a little festival here in the village, there are children to older people to old people mixing together and like assisting to noise rock concerts or songs or anything, and everybody is mixing and it gives a real popular feeling about making culture in a territory. So
Jennifer, I'd like to add something. I've been working with Pierre for the last few years and Emily as well, and there is this similar kind of situation where in Detroit, in the collaboration with Emily, we brought very ephemeral cultural venue in different parts of the city, and where all the residents and the community around it can watch performance, and is very open. And we translate the same way with Pierre, where some of the musicians of Detroit are in partnership with Pierre and Figurely, where we repeat the same kind of idea, but except it's a very rural kind of performance with Detroit musicians, and it has been like this 3, 4, 5 years of ephemeral, cultural, nomadic kind of value.
Exactly.
Merci tout le monde pour ce débat qui commence et qui s'enclenche. J'ai l'impression que ce serait le bon moment de parler du travail de Gabriel Boulanger, qui investit depuis plusieurs années un quartier, qui est le quartier de Grenoble. I think it can be, all this debate can be really in relation with the work of Gabriel Boulanger, a work involved, in fact, in a neighborhood, in specific neighborhood called Renaudy here in Grenoble. Gabriel, could you speak a little bit about your context?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to answer in French for our French audience. Yeah, is it good? donc ça fait depuis 4 ou 5 ans que je suis à Renaudy. Et donc c'est un quartier patrimonial à Saint-Martin-d'Hères. C'est donc l'architecte Renaudy qui a créé des appartements où il n'y a pas d'angle droit. Donc c'est tout en pointe. Voilà. Et donc, comme Gina, il y a cette idée d'habiter l'endroit où on travaille. Donc j'habite 3 jours par semaine à Renaudy et 3 autres jours à la montagne. Et c'est la première fois que j'ai pu investir un quartier. Et c'est vrai que je me rends compte que d'y être depuis longtemps, c'est comme s'il y avait besoin de 3 ans pour vraiment commencer à créer des projets qui sont vraiment en lien avec les besoins du territoire. Donc au départ, avec le musée du temps libre, on a rencontré nos voisins, on a fait des portraits de temps libre. On a fait une collection pour voir un peu comment chacun était des auteurs de temps libre singuliers. Et de fil en aiguille, au bout de 3 ans, il y avait cette question du temps libre qui serait aussi comme un temps pour prendre soin de soi et les uns des autres. Et donc, on a ouvert ce projet de Art Care avec cette idée de transformer les espaces publics en zones de soins. Je fais un petit peu en anglais aussi.
Je t'en prie, tu fais comme tu veux.
Our idea is to transform public spaces into a shared zone of care. Et donc, on a amené, comme en Vendôme, une caravane, mais sauf que nous, c'est une caravane sauna. On peut rentrer à 5 dedans. Donc, tout l'hiver, dans le quartier Renaudy, il y a ce temps, cet îlot de chaleur humaine où on peut bénéficier d'un sauna pour 2 € parce qu'on est en quartier populaire. Donc, l'idée, c'est aussi de comment est-ce qu'on peut prendre soin de soi aussi, voilà, sans être forcément hyper fortuné ou riche. Et donc, un salon de massage partagé. Et donc, ce qu'on a testé à la petite échelle locale de Renaudy, on a voulu la faire à une plus grande échelle de celle de la métropole, et donc de faire voyager ce petit dispositif de salon de soins mobiles dans différents quartiers populaires et dans différents endroits à la montagne. Et voilà, et il a fallu au moins ces 3 ans et de vivre ici dans le quartier, de partager the all daily life, le quotidien pour imaginer, pour arriver à un tel projet qui nous a été un peu suggéré par des femmes du quartier qui avaient besoin et qui voulaient de temps partagé autour du soin.
Merci Gabrielle. Je trouve que le travail de Gabrielle ainsi que ce qui vient d'être exposé nous amène à nous poser une question qui est celle de la relation aux habitants des villes, aux habitants des quartiers et de la façon dont on construit avec eux les projets et surtout la confiance. In fact, this leads us to ask us the question about our relation to inhabitants of the cities, inhabitants of neighborhoods, and about the way how we build trust in between, in fact. So perhaps Myriam and Catalina, do you have something to say about this question of trust? Myriam et Catalina, auriez-vous quelque chose à nous dire par rapport à cette question de la confiance et de la relation aux habitants dans votre travail?
Now I'm not mute. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah, but maybe before we try to answer, it would be important to just try to introduce a bit what Life Facultad was trying to do. It's actually a place, but it was an open apartment that was lended to us through Le Pacifique in the neighborhood called l'Abbaye in Grenoble. But we were only there 3 weeks, so it's in this weird frame of residency, artistic residency. So I think it's kind of different from everything that has been described for now, which is more like this long-term living, working habits. So La Facultad is a place in this open apartment that was addressed to people in situation of exile and migration, and the people that are already accompanying them, supporting them, building the trust with them already. And we were sharing those sensorial, perceptive, dreamy practices with them, which are raising the question of how we can build trust, make trust through a shared sensorial experience. Is it possible to create that form of trust that is not based on, let's say, the identities we have or the fact of knowing each other or not, but just based on a physical, somatic, sensorial moment that we share? So that was basically La Facultad. Maybe I can just give the voice to Catalina if she has to add something.
Yeah, I think it was the question was also how to build a link of trust even if we were there for a short time. So is it even possible? Like Gabrielle, you were saying, like after 3 years, you actually understood and got to hear differently what the territory was saying. And for us, I think it was a lot of pre-work of speaking with the associations that are in place and actually trying to do like a kind of chain of trust, because you trust this person, then this person might trust this other person who brings another person to brings another person. So that when people arrive, there's nothing to be, we don't need to convince anyone, but people would come already kind of trusting the unknown situation and delirious situation that they might enter. It's hard to do. That's all I could say for the moment.
Merci, merci beaucoup, merci toutes les deux. Thank you very much, thank you all of you. I think can be as a good moment just to start the second part, or at least to stop the first time of this debate. Je pense que c'est le bon moment de faire une petite pause avant de passer au deuxième temps du débat. Il est clair que nous n'avons pas encore pu entendre tout le monde, que tous les artistes n'ont pas encore pu se présenter, mais j'imagine que le temps 2 nous donnera cette occasion. Hopefully, the second part of the debate will give us the opportunity to learn a little bit more about all of you. In fact, about the artist than today. Than for the first part, it was not possible to discover your work, but for the second part. Thank you.
And Jacob, has anyone called in? And I would just remind our audience that the lines are open to Jacob and Mahmoud. And if you'd like to interact with any of the participants in this cave, please just give us a call or text us in the YouTube chat. And
yeah.
Yep.
Everyone's very shy right now, but
okay.
We have put the numbers in the chat and our pink phones are anxiously awaiting your call.
I think we want also to mention Jacob, would you show up in the...
No, I mentioned Jacob.
Okay, and Ishan and technical.
Yeah. So there are lots of people working in the background, but while we take a very brief pause and see if anyone wants to call in, I'd invite Pierre to just give us a little mental reprieve, if you'd like. If you have the energy to, as we take in all of the narratives and stories in 2 different languages that the participants just shared. Everyone take a break. Okay. Merci, Pierre. Merci beaucoup. Okay. And Jennifer, thank you so much for setting up the conversation around the four different contexts in which the participants are working, and the inflection of the context on the work and understanding of place. As we move into the second part of this conversation, I'm going to address the elephant in the cave, the uncomfortable question of how projects are funded and to what end. And it's something that's very different in different contexts in which artists work. In particular, it's fair to say that most of the projects described by our French friends are funded through public resources that are institutionally curated. In the Detroit context, that's very different. Most of the projects are philanthropically funded, sometimes self-funded, and sometimes have to do with industry or the entertainment industry as an activity that must self-sustain. So as we move into this conversation of the arts, performance, institutions, and perhaps the instrumentality of the arts in the reconsideration of the city, I wanted to turn over the question first to a host of people, to Jake and Shireen, and ask if you could share with us a little bit about who supports the arts in Detroit and why.
Yeah. Well, I will say that to start, when a host of people started really presenting work in Detroit about 8 years ago, we were self-funded for sure. And we were self-funded by the fact that like we both had full-time jobs, and you can't see it, but right now we are also broadcasting from our rehearsal space, which is in our house. So we like really tried to condense our expenses in order to start making work. And then as we started building a body of work with our ensemble, we started to get more funding from national funders like the Knight Foundation, but on a project by project basis. Like there isn't an abundance of general operating support to support the ensemble as a whole. So we worked really on a project by project basis, getting funding from national funders from here or there. There really isn't that much city funding. So we started over years and years of like growing our budget so we'd be eligible for more funding to get state funding. And then other than that, it was really self-funding through crowdfunding, you know, asking our communities to support our work. And that is great as a way to sort of help expand your circle, but also we're not really hooked into wealth in our community. So like we have a lot of funders at a lot of donors at a low level of funding, which is wonderful to show that to see the support of our community, but it isn't necessarily what we can rely on year to year to support our work. So even though we've been growing our budgets over the last 8 years, it really has a lot to do with the quality of the work that we were making that we then can put out into grants that for the most part, it's like 70% were funded by national grants, which have just only started coming in the last 2 or 3 years. Do you have anything to add?
No, I would just say that the question of why things get funded in Detroit, I think is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear the other folks from Detroit answer this question, because I think there was a moment an ongoing moment for many years where the national eye was kind of on Detroit for good and bad reasons. And so a lot of money did come in for a little while. I don't know if that's going to sustain itself for a while. And I think that, that reason of why and who, obviously a lot of money that does come into the city goes for non-arts things, right? So I think one of the things that we've tried to do is sort of expand our work out to connect with other, types of organizations, non-arts organizations and whatnot, in order to not into like hook into their funding, but because it aligns with our work. But so a lot of some of our money or budgets come from that kind of work,
earned income
through teaching and educational work, which has been a great part of working in and with community. So yeah, but I'd be interested to hear what other folks are saying about, why.
But I just want to add one more thing before we pass it on, is that it's also a unique thing of how much labor and effort goes into fundraising to make our work happen here, which is like something that I don't think gets talked about enough, of like how much labor is put on the artist in order to sustain your practice.
Could I, Shireen and Jake, just a quick interlude in French for our friends.
Please.
C'est incroyable que les artistes à Détroit souvent sont en charge de créer leur propre institution parallèle, car il manque un ministère de culture, il y a très peu d'institutions qui soutiennent les artistes. Les artistes à Détroit qui sont représentés ici, ils construisent leurs propres institutions, des micro-institutions insertées par eux-mêmes dans les lieux, les quartiers, où ils sont en charge de trouver les budgets, d'écrire leurs propres demandes pour les ressources, les bourses philanthropiques, de trouver leurs propres ressources dans l'économie artistique et créateur, et de prendre en charge l'administration, la curation, la production, la scénographie, le broadcast, la communication de chacun de ces projets. Donc, c'est une circonstance qu'on peut imaginer est certainement instrumentalisée par les pouvoirs philanthropiques dans le contexte de Détroit et le contexte américain. And if I could flip it to you, Billy Mart, sorry for the quick transition, but if you could help us weigh in to understand from your perspective why and how the arts are supported in Detroit, and to what end?
I've noticed over the last, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've lived here about 10 years now. And why are the arts? I think over the last few years, I've seen projects that are focused on supporting neighborhoods in the city become funded. I've seen that as being a priority. But there's still a tension because artists either make their money kind of through a market-based approach, or they make it through an institutional-based approach. And I think both of those can create a tension in a neighborhood, because when, let's say, an artist who's based on an institutional relationships, which I would count myself as one of them, I am connected to the conversation, right? With the big C, like what the big C conversation, like, and how am I and how is my work fitting within the larger conversation? Because heaven forbid I would be outside of that conversation and therefore outside of all institutional funding. So but then what is the conversation that is happening between neighbors and in my geographical neighborhood? And are the people in my neighborhood having the same conversation as the big capital C conversation that is happening in institutions. So there's a tension there when it comes to funding. And the temptation is to listen. Well, actually, that's a tension that I have is, am I listening to my neighbors in order to continue my career?
Yeah. That's real.
Yeah.
So especially when there's a bunch of when it becomes popular to care about your neighbors.
Very trendy these days.
So where so yeah, there's a lot of soul searching, and I think there's a suspension that needs to happen. And I will say that that's a part of that suspension is something that Detroit has taught me. When I first moved here, I moved from Los Angeles, where the first thing you say to somebody is, "So, what do you do?" And it's because you're working within some kind of creative economy in which you're trying to gauge what that person can do for you and what you can do for them. When I moved to Detroit, everybody was telling me all these stories, everything about themselves. They were giving all of them, and they didn't ask me about me at all. And I was thinking, this is a weird power dynamic. I know everything about you, and you don't know anything about me. You're giving me a lot of power. And what I learned from Detroit is so many people, in essence, were saying, we don't care what your prepackaged image is. One, we can see something. We get something already. We get who you are. And two, we'll see what you do. And in doing that, it enlarged my understanding of how representation works. There is an emotional, spiritual, action-based dimension that sometimes we get too limited into. And so I have to say, I use that new frame that I got from Detroit to do my own soul searching when it comes to representing neighborhoods for institutional purposes.
Thank you, Billy. I wonder if we could invite Emily to talk about the tensions in Detroit between artistic practice as culture and artistic practice as entertainment and part of an industry.
I'm sorry, I have received the first call, if that's possible, to transfer the call.
Sure, we'll pick it up with Emily right after.
So just so, and
is someone calling in?
Yes, I will transfer the call now. It's from Mademoiselle Esther.
Mahmoud, can you help us understand the question? Okay, maybe we go back to this question with Emily between the tension, and then Mahmoud, as you bring the speaker back on, we can return to it after Emily's response. The question between artistic practice as cultural production and artistic practice as entertainment and industry, and how that plays out on the Detroit scene.
Well, I'm actually new to the big C conversation of institutional funding. I actually just received my first grant this year. Sorry, caller, are you there? Okay. So actually, Kevin and Gina touched on a couple of different awesome points, but I come from
like more of the entertainment, make flyers, promote my shows, get people to a venue, you know, that side of the entertainment part of it. Going back to like the beginning, how, you know, in all things, it's about who you know and creating relationships, right?
Yeah.
There is a different dynamic in having the conversation I'm seeing, and I'm very grateful to the Knight Foundation this year for learning and connecting some of the dots, and seeing the difference in cultural funding versus trying to get 100 to 200 people to come to pay $20 to come to a show, buy my merchandise. All of these things have been the model as an entertainer that I was existing under. But I also have, I lived in a house in Ferndale, and once a month I would have fantastic parties, and many of the musicians of Detroit of all skill levels would come, and I introduced people, many people who had never met or jammed together, and saw a lot of projects and interesting things come out of that dynamic. There is a lot of tension in Detroit. I'm actually grateful to it, as I travel as a musician, be brought up here. It's funny, the lesson that I learned was I got lost in my art at some certain point, and I started out being very, very overzealous. Come to my show, come to my show. Here's my flyer. I mean, and then it got to the point to where, you know, bands break up. You just, you have that real question with yourself of why are you doing this and what are you doing? And I learned when I didn't have anything to say about myself and I wasn't pushing myself because I just didn't know what I was doing, I found that there was more interest. People were more, like, the more I created mystery, the more interest that there was. It was a very interest, and that was a very amazing lesson for me as an artist in this city, especially because everyone's an artist. And so that thing that, am I saying Kevin? Did I call you Kevin and it's not Kevin? I should know by now.
You mean Jake? You mean Jake?
No, I mean, who just, yes.
Billy?
Billy, I'm so sorry, Billy. What Billy just said about coming from Los Angeles and the way that no one knew about him. And it's kind of because like no one cares here, but we do. And that's the same thing. The more I talked about myself, the more I felt like I put off certain people. And the less I talked about myself, the more interested people became. And that's a really interesting dynamic in Detroit, I think. And because everything's so spread out and there's so many artists and everyone's good, I mean, like there's so many people that I could name, like let's say a Paul Randolph or something like that, who is very famous overseas, or a Kern Brantley, who's very famous overseas, but comes back to Detroit and you're just, you know what I'm saying? Just the dude that plays bass here, but he's Lady Gaga's bass player.
Yeah.
So Detroit has this different dynamic of you really have to prove yourself here. And what Billy said about, okay, we'll see what you do is very much alive here.
Yeah. Truth. Emily, thanks for that. I'm wondering if we can pass this over to our friends in Le Magasin in Saint-Étienne with a question of whether their practice in Saint-Étienne is a close similarity insofar that it serves as a freestanding, autonomous micro institution in a city where its economic challenges make it possible to practice in ways that are impossible in the metropolitan areas of higher economic flux. So, pour les amis à Saint-Étienne, Mathieu, Dan, Hélène, est-ce que le magasin, que vous avez à Saint-Étienne fonctionne comme une institution autonome et pas simplement comme un projet?
Pas tout à fait. En fait, au tout départ, le projet, il est vraiment un projet personnel, une envie personnelle, et donc du coup, il n'y avait pas de soutien institutionnel sur ce projet pendant la première année, les 2 premières années en fait. C'était vraiment l'idée de trouver de l'espace et d'offrir de l'espace à des projets qui n'en trouvaient pas dans l'institution telle qu'elle a été fabriquée, comme elle fonctionnait en France. Mais aujourd'hui, en fait, on a des soutiens publics pour ce projet, des petits soutiens publics. Après, ce qui permet quand même, nous, pour ma part, d'avoir même pu penser à un projet comme ça, c'est le fonctionnement pour le spectacle vivant de l'intermittence du spectacle, qui est quand même qui permet du coup, évidemment, d'avoir quand même des revenus pour penser et rêver des projets. Donc, je pense que ça ne pourrait pas exister de cette manière-là. Et donc voilà, du coup, en fait, c'est quand même un projet qui fonctionne beaucoup avec du bénévolat, beaucoup de temps offert. C'est un endroit où il y a peu d'argent, même s'il y a un peu d'argent public, mais vraiment peu d'argent public. Et donc, du coup, on se situe vraiment à une marge par rapport à d'autres lieux institutionnels, mais ce qui nous permet aussi une grande souplesse d'action. On peut tenter d'inventer des nouvelles choses, ou en tout cas des nouvelles façons de se mettre en relation. Ça permet aussi de se rencontrer assez facilement, parce qu'il n'y a pas... disons que les enjeux, en fait, sont tout de suite ceux de la relation avec les gens, les artistes. Voilà. Je ne sais pas si ça répond à peu près... ou en tout cas, ça apporte une pierre à la discussion, mais voilà un peu comment ça fonctionne pour nous au magasin.
Merci pour ça. Et,
Ring.
Oh, great. Thank you. Do you want to patch someone in?
Actually, he hanged up, but I can get the question. I will
That's
try
great.
to imitate the reaction as much as I can.
Okay.
In Saint-Étienne, some territorial marketing expert proposed to paint the walls in yellow because it was a color that has never been associated to the town. On the contrary, red, black, blue, or green. Painted in yellow brought a new color for a new start. In Grenoble, the same kind of people proposed to set up a street art festival to celebrate the Always Forward Grenoble, inviting OP for one-day work. So the question is, do you also have some kind of issues painting the walls in Detroit?
I love this question. Gina, do you paint walls in Detroit?
Not based on what marketing teams tell us, no. But there is this.
Gina, could you describe from the skateboard park and all the graffiti and how you deal with the city, or what is the relationship with the painting?
Yes, so in our neighborhood, we paint houses, bright colors, but of our own determination. And then we have the skateboard park right at Sculpture Park, which sits along an expressway. So it used to be empty lots, and now it's a concrete outdoor skate park that actually helps buffer the highway traffic, the Davison Expressway, with the residential neighborhood. It's very visible. And yes, it is covered in graffiti, much to the disdain of our mayor and other powers that be. And it became, well, it is contentious, but for 1 year of our lives, it kind of became a court battle. And so they don't like the colors we choose to paint, or they don't like that we let anyone express themselves through paint on the park. So we came up with a compromise, and we said, well, this is commissioned artwork. We allow, it's an open and free commission. And so it's privately owned property.
Brilliant.
It's like, we love this art and it's privately owned property, so you can't tell us. And they, I guess, see it as a public nuisance is maybe what they called it. So the compromise became any external walls that are there was determined an exterior and an interior to this concrete outdoor skate park. And the exterior facing walls have to be kept free of text. Like, letters are the enemy. But on the interior surfaces, it's anything goes. So I guess we compromise that it's less visually offensive on the interior, and we will comply with banality on the exterior.
But Gina, isn't the sort of analog for us is like, Gilbert bringing in Shepard Fairey or whatever to build, to do this sort of like, officially sanctioned, high profile, quote unquote street art that, that looks good on TV commercials or whatever. And yet at the same time, they're shutting down actual street writers and folks that are, at the sculpture park and whatnot. So
exactly, there is this sort of like marketable graffiti that enters the space of PR and public relations and advertising that is deemed like acceptable. So yes, Shepard Fairey was the big example because there are huge walls covered and billboards are painting of his downtown because and then the joke became, well, stuff he ran around doing rogue around town actually was a felony and he had to go to a court battle. So but I would say, like, part of the issue with that is that Detroit, until very recently, didn't have any sort of like a public arts platform at the municipal level. We didn't have an ally in City Hall that we could go to and even talk to about this. So it became this like one-on-one battle that consumed our lives. In the meantime, like, if you have the power and the money to sort of have a relationship, which we do have relationships in City Hall, but like the kind that revenue streams, like you catch that kind of a glimmer in someone's eye, then all of a sudden it's acceptable to commission like glossy, high profile, quote unquote, street artists to do these big public, like, are they public artworks or is it advertising and PR? And there's, especially in the downtown area and maybe some billboards around town or midtown, it becomes slippery, where it's like, when does arts and culture get co-opted for the sake of marketing and PR buzz? Which is what it sounds like maybe the wall campaign was in Grenoble and Saint-Étienne.
In French, the big difference, la grande différence entre la campagne de peindre les murs jaunes et ce qui se passe à Détroit, c'est que c'est la ville municipale qui paie avec les ressources publiques pour créer une brand, une image renouvelée de la ville. Et à Détroit, il n'y a pas cet investissement public, donc il y a les corporations qui décident quelles sont les pubs et quelles sont les images qu'ils voudraient projeter pour bénéficier de cette production créative liée directement à leur messagerie. Donc c'est de ça que nos collègues à Détroit viennent de discuter. And the last question that I have in this portion of the conversation about arts funding and instrumentalization is a critical prod to question whether the social turn has potentially more sinister applications. So we know that artists have been given a great responsibility, and some might say burden, in transforming communities, in repairing the social bond, in inflecting civil society, making austerity more palatable. So in this social turn, are we disguising real social need by superficially repairing the social bond? Are we helping everyone cope with deregulation and the disintegration of state-sanctioned social networks and welfare systems? And in this new version of the relationship between the artist, the resident, and the citizen, the onus is really on the participant to make things better. Je ne sais pas, Jennifer, si tu pourrais m'aider à cadrer ça en français, mais c'est une question que j'ai vraiment voulu proposer à Gabriel à Grenoble au sujet de la responsabilité et peut-être le poids mis sur l'artiste pour reparer les besoins et les échecs sociaux dans les communautés ou dans les quartiers où il faut plus d'investissement public et peut-être moins d'interventionnisme artistique. Je ne sais pas, c'est une question ouverte. Merci.
La question est excellente. Je rajoute juste aussi par rapport à ce rôle social des artistes. Est-ce que aussi parfois on te fait la remarque que ce rôle social en fait devient tellement prépondérant qu'il ferait que tu ne serais plus artiste en quelque sorte?
Ouais.
Alors c'est vrai que là, en tout cas, quand je regarde le travail au sein du quartier Renaudie, parfois j'ai l'impression que les actions qu'on va porter, qui pour moi sont artistiques, parce que voilà, derrière, il y a la référence de sculpture sociale, de Beuys, de l'art relationnel, de s'intéresser à chaque personne comme un auteur potentiel. Donc il y a un bagage artistique, mais je vois bien que des fois, il y a des actions qui émergent, qu'on travaille avec les personnes du quartier, qu'on fait émerger, qui sont presque de l'ordre d'un service public, en fait, où j'aimerais bien que la maison de quartier du coin reprenne quelque chose qu'on a testé, comme par exemple ces salons de soins, où chacune transmet sa culture de soins particulière. Dans l'idée, au départ, je me disais, nous, en tant qu'artistes, on va tester, on va révéler un peu des propositions qui sont appropriées pour le quartier. Et dans l'idée, après, les pouvoirs publics vont s'en saisir. Et nous, on est là en tant qu'expérimentateurs, on teste des choses. Ce qui ne marche pas, on laisse. Ce qui marche, peut-être ça va être repris et institué et porté en régularité. Et en fait, non, parce qu'il n'y a pas tant de sous que ça dans le social. Donc, les artistes se retrouvent à faire un travail social. Et alors, ce qui est génial, c'est que là, avec le Covid, comme la maison de quartier a envie de soutenir les artistes et les personnes, les personnes du milieu culturel du quartier et de la ville, et qu'en même temps, il se passe des choses dans les espaces publics du quartier populaire, ils se sont mis à faire des demandes pour faire un festival un peu de rue pour soutenir les artistes et les comédiens, les comédiennes. Et donc là, par exemple, je me retrouve à faire des réunions avec une maison de quartier et je dois presque, comme une institution culturelle pourrait le faire, à les accompagner à qu'est-ce que ça veut dire que de faire un festival artistique, combien est-ce qu'on paye les artistes, combien... Et donc c'est vrai que...
Tu fais de la curation, quoi.
Presque, voilà. Et en même temps, je trouve ça chouette quand justement toutes ces frontières, elles se floutent et on devient chacune vraiment des co-auteurs de la vie culturelle du quartier. Mais c'est vrai que du coup, ça demande de passer par des casquettes et être un espèce de médiateur, médiatrice. Et donc voilà, et je trouve que c'est super intéressant que c'est pas qu'une relation de l'artiste avec des habitants. Non, en fait, c'est des relations entre toutes les personnes qui vivent et qui font vivre le quartier. Et on est en train pour moi, de construire et d'inventer des choses à une échelle micro-locale. Et pour aller aussi un peu plus loin sur la relation qu'il peut aussi avoir avec les personnes qu'on rencontre au sein des projets artistiques. Là, par exemple, au même moment où on est en train de parler, en dessous, il y a une rencontre qui est faite avec un groupe de femmes qui s'est constitué lors de nos salons de massage, donc des femmes issues de quartiers populaires, mais pas que. Et on a décidé, grâce à ce projet artistique des salons de soins mobiles, de créer une sorte de coopérative ensemble, où on mélangerait, où en même temps on serait payé, en même temps on ferait du bénévolat. Et on a formé une équipe de travail pour justement ce qu'on a expérimenté dans un cadre artistique et social à petite échelle, de voir comment est-ce que ça peut devenir une sorte de réseau et de service dans la métropole où on peut intervenir dans d'autres quartiers populaires, former des groupes qui vont pouvoir utiliser la caravane.
Et
ou
s'aimer, alors.
Voilà, ou prendre soin aussi des personnes qui prennent soin dans les hôpitaux. Donc, j'ai l'impression que voilà, quand on s'investit vraiment sur un territoire, qu'en même temps, on est ancré dans le territoire, mais qu'en même temps, on a aussi des liens avec des choses qui se passent à l'extérieur, il y a des dynamiques qui se tissent et qui sont beaucoup plus intéressantes et puissantes que quand on est dans le rôle classique de l'artiste, à faire son petit truc avec son petit imaginaire.
Mm-hmm. Merci. And social enterprise, or do you sometimes wish for a clearer demarcation between those roles so that there's perhaps less instrumentalization for either government or development, as in the case in Detroit?
I just wonder in like historically when was it divided and why should it be divided, like the social and the artistic, and where are the moments where in my practice or in our practice we actually realize that it is a limit that we don't want to pass. So in a certain way I'm like maybe art has always been taking care of the social, so why should it be different than that? Why should we divide and give to the state certain roles and then divide the citizenship from the artistry? That's on one hand, but on the other hand, it's true that I think for me, where the limit where an artistic project that is threaded in the social tissues needs to continue be working in the artistic level, meaning it needs to stay, what we say with Miriam, delirious. It needs to remain and to have the freedom of actually keep on proposing and interacting with everything that is not functional, not useful. And I think that's what I think I would always defend. Even though we are dealing with social questions that are extremely pragmatic and real and political and problematic, like day-to-day basis, the questions we can engage with are actually those of imagination and poetics. And I think when the artist just stops asking the questions from that point of view and starts just having to produce answers, pragmatic answers, there starts being a real problem. I don't know if that's clear.
Very clear. Merci.
Anya, can I speak to this?
Yeah.
Because this is actually my wheelhouse. If we go back in whatever time period in history, first of all, let's establish, like, the fact is artists are always going to be artists. With broke, paid. If you, as a creator, and I'm sure I can speak for everyone on here, you're going to make art regardless of who pays attention to it, because you're compelled to do it. And if we go back thousands and thousands of years, at any point in history, the artists have been the leaders in, whether you want to call it cool, social reforms, corporate settlement. Like, somehow the artists have now or they always were, just pushed to the side, never paid well, but they're actually the leaders of society. Like the Renaissance period, we're actually entering a new one now. Artists lead both social reforms and where people hang out and go to talk about whatever life problems they're having. So I just wanted to bring that up, that as much as, like, there's going to be day-to-day politics of all sorts and all sorts of questions. But the artists not only provide a poetic or introspective, whether it's a song about a situation or a painting that brings you to tears, it's intellectually, we have these conversations that have to do with our emotional and spiritual framework. And artists have always been on the forefront of those issues, whatever the issue is.
Thank you for that. as we wrap up this session, Catalina, I don't know if you wanted, I'm sorry, Miriam, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, but I think there's a lot for us to digest.
May I just add something?
Yes, please. Yes.
Because there can be in between, you know, in France, in Vendôme, the friends with who I'm working most of the time, programming concerts or collaborating for cultural actions, it just started. It didn't start from the top, but it was like young people who wanted to program concerts and who did it in a complete citizen way, investing the social cultural center in the poorest neighborhood of Vendôme. And just as everything brought so many people together to assist to the concerts and so many bands came, then the city got involved in it and started to sustain this movement. So it's
because you made it cool.
Yeah, exactly. And because popular, rock music were not considered as culture by the French state at the moment, so it was only like a spontaneous activity with flyers and everything that built up and all the possibilities that are now taking care of many musicians and many artists in the neighborhood. So that's very important to say too. And well,
thank you. We're going to propose being very strong and skipping the interlude and moving to Jean-Michel because we started late. Are we okay with that, team?
No more phone calls. It seems that we have a phone call.
Oh, we want phone calls. Yeah.
Mahmoud had one. Unfortunately, I'm still very lonely here in the US, but Mahmoud is a popular one.
It's too early.
It's too early.
So I have a question from a lovely young lady that she's motivated and wants to know more about the technical subject of this conference. How do we set this conference together? Her name is Esther.
Istin. Fabulous. Istin, this is a great moment for us to introduce Ishan Pal, who is the VJ, the secret VJ in the back of house, who is putting us all into this digital scenography together. And also to introduce Oliver Popadich, Jacob Komersi, and Ziwan Lee, who worked on the digital scenography to help us co-inhabit the cave, but also build the digital institution. So thank you for remarking that we've tried to bridge the physical divide of Zoom to sort of attempt to be together. And we can see that it's still a technical challenge.
Anya, excuse-moi.
Yeah. Oui.
Que la personne qui a posé la question soit très jeune et ne comprenne pas encore l'anglais, ni peut-être.
Ah, d'accord.
Je me permets de faire une petite réponse courte.
Oh oui, super. Oui.
Très jeune auditrice, si tu nous entends, je voudrais te dire que nous sommes toutes et toutes assises devant des fonds verts. Il s'agit de tissus. Parfois, ils sont derrière nous, parfois, ils sont sur nous. Et grâce à l'aide d'Ishan, qui vit aux États-Unis, mais pas à Détroit, et qui est indien, je crois, eh bien, nous sommes tous et toutes dans une grotte. Bon, cette grotte est rose, et moi, j'attends l'arrivée de la licorne. Et derrière, il y a aussi Jacob qui répond au téléphone, et Mahmoud. Et je tiens à les remercier. À bientôt, Esther.
Merci. Super. Donc, on va passer le micro virtuel à notre ami Jean-Michel pour nous faire comprendre comment faire les liens entre toutes ces conversations. Jean-Michel.
Yes, that's very tricky stuff because we are running short of time, and most of the questions I would have liked to ask have been already asked. So maybe just briefly, as a planner, urbanist, I was interested in knowing how far cities influence the art of the people today? Because we've been told that they've been called upon to help us to better plan or better understand the cities, but I would like to understand how the cities influence the art. Will it be possible, for example, for the people of Detroit to work in the same manner in different places? And also for the people of Saint-Etienne, I still wonder why you end up in Saint-Etienne, because all the strategy of the public strategy was to create storytelling, but the design to attract artists. And I wonder if the strategy worked, or maybe it's because just simply that the city is poor and it's very cheap to buy something. So maybe start with the Detroit people.
Billy, maybe?
What was the question? The last part of the question?
Could you do the same stuff in different places, or
is it only possible in Detroit?
Could you work the same way?
Yeah.
Does
Well,
Detroit
the
really
answer-
act as someone?
Well,
yeah.
So some of the work that I do is improvisational, and it is movement based, and it is text based. So and it is stuff that I've done in different cities. But no, for me and my practice and who I am, like, I don't think I can't imagine other places in which I could come alive in my practice as much as I have here in the city. And I don't think that's just boosterism. I really think that that's my experience. And it's difficult. Why would that be? I guess I've experienced with my practice an equilibrium, a dynamic equilibrium in which I feel like I am able to receive and to share in this city. And maybe part of it is because it's kind of, in some ways, like Emily said, it's kind of off the map in some ways. And I don't have a really great answer for that. I'll just say nope.
Can we jump in?
Yeah, Shireen, please.
Okay, great. I would say, there's the short answer of like, we're theater directors, we could go direct something somewhere else, fine. But like our art practice and our ensemble with a host of people is absolutely Detroit specific and could not be placed anywhere else. I think and all of our shows have had a layer of either Detroit history or personal history of our ensemble that is made up a lot of native Detroiters. One of the things we're very interested in is personal storytelling that comes out with a lot of our shows. And so it has a very distinct Detroit voice, I would say. But part of what we know is true is that this voice does transfer other places. It doesn't need to only exist in performing here. It can go other places and represent as a very Detroit specific art that other people can relate and intersect with and still have emotional connections and connect to their own place with. And I think that's really important for our specific identity, is that we're in conversation with others, but it's based really in Detroit. Yeah, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I'd just say, I think a question I have, is what is a city, right? Like, what does it mean? What does the city mean? And, for me, it has always been in Detroit, the people of Detroit that have really been just so, I don't want to romanticize, but just really inspirational for me as an artist. And so I have gotten to be, when we left New York, a lot of our friends thought we were absolutely just batshit crazy, for coming to Detroit. But Detroit has undoubtedly made me a better artist, like beyond, so so where some of the kind of functionality and the specifics might have been accomplished somewhere else, I just don't think I would be the artist that I am now without the influence of the people of Detroit and not just the city of Detroit, that sort of constructed idea of city. And a lot of that, that's a very complicated thing to say in and of itself. But yeah, so I guess that's my response.
Yeah, I would say I would agree, and that we're most of our work, besides like creating the art that we do, is relationship building. It is about the people and about our relationships, and in sort of this context of that Adrienne Marie Brown calls a visionary fiction. So together with our audience, we are trying to visualize a future that moves people to go through the world differently. And so that has deepened, that practice has deepened here in a way that I cannot imagine it would happen anywhere else.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
You talked about this kind of the web of relationships, Shireen, and I think that's what was difficult for me to answer the question, is because sure, I can go someplace else and do something, but the more my creativity, my practice becomes deeper in relationship to my neighborhood and into the city, the harder it is to put into words what that experience is. And so there is, that's one thing I do love about the city, is that I have such a difficult time describing it in words, because it does work on multiple dimensions, and it is embodied. So that's, yeah. So
there's definitely a vortex here. For real, man. Like everybody said, one can go play bass. I can go play bass anywhere. I would not be the musician I am today if I wasn't brought up and trained by Detroiters. I've traveled a lot of places, and I've really never seen such grit and originality. I mean, Detroit made its own genre. Where else in the world made a genre of music? I really don't know. Like Motown is exclusively a Detroit genre. Other styles of music or genres are either amalgamations or they call, they're joined, the combinations of other things that have come together throughout the world. But I guess, yeah, I definitely wouldn't be the artist I am today without being brought up here in Detroit. And I feel excited every time I leave here to take a team of people to go play somewhere else, and I watch how it's received. Like, that's what makes me know how special Detroit is as well.
Ok, alors peut-être brièvement, juste pour terminer, est-ce qu'il y a un son de Saint-Étienne, est-ce qu'il y a un design de Saint-Étienne, ou est-ce que juste on vient ici parce que on peut acheter 1 mètre carré pour 1000 balles et la vie n'est pas si désagréable.
En fait, alors moi, je ne sais, enfin, je suis à Saint-Étienne parce que je suis né à Saint-Étienne, donc déjà ça, voilà. Après, un projet comme le magasin, l'opportunité, elle est évidemment celle que tu viens de nommer du mètre carré pas très cher, c'est-à-dire qu'un projet comme celui-là, il peut se permettre d'être imaginé assez facilement parce que les espaces peuvent être loués avec de petits moyens. Et donc, du coup, ça, c'est vrai que ça rend concret très rapidement aussi des utopies de projets comme ça qui peuvent voilà, prendre corps et vie avec déjà des moyens plus petits. Voilà. Mais après, je ne sais pas.
Non, le design, c'est pas...
Yeah. Saint-Étienne, c'est plutôt la ville de l'anti-design.
Yeah.
Mais, parce que le design, c'est vraiment une vitrine qui correspond à rien dans la ville, mais dans la vie de 99% des gens, quoi. Il y a l'école, il y a la cité du design, mais c'est très rarement ouvert. Et ça ne s'adresse vraiment pas aux habitants de Saint-Étienne, en tout cas. C'est pas, il n'y a vraiment aucun lien. Mais par contre, il y a un anti-design très, très prononcé à Saint-Étienne. Et ça, c'est assez intéressant pour les artistes. Moi, par exemple, l'influence que je peux avoir ici de la ville, c'est justement de ne pas y être. C'est-à-dire qu'on peut être très rapidement à la campagne. Donc, on ne subit plus la ville. Donc ça, c'est intéressant pour se ressourcer artistiquement. Mais voilà, ça fait partie de l'anti-design. C'est pas, je sais pas comment dire, c'est pas ce qu'on vend, c'est pas ce qu'on. Et après, c'est sûr que déjà, je pense qu'il y a enfin, c'est des choses assez simples en fait. C'est que la ville est petite, donc on se connaît tous assez rapidement. On peut faire des choses. Effectivement, voilà, on habite tous des endroits qui sont 2 fois, 3 fois plus grands que ce qu'on pourrait habiter dans des grandes villes. Et donc, il y a vraiment une facilité à faire les choses. Et puis, il y a moins de... Enfin, les gens, ils sont plus en collaboration qu'en concurrence aussi. Et ça, c'est vraiment... ça fait partie de l'anti-design aussi. Je pense que c'est pas une chose qui est voulue par le... c'est l'anti-procédé de ce qui se passe, quoi. Et ça, c'est intéressant aussi. Puis le fait qu'il y ait aussi, par exemple, le magasin, il n'y a pas d'argent. C'est-à-dire qu'on ni on paye, ni on est payé. Donc, si on vient, c'est pour travailler. C'est ni pour se faire voir, ni pour je ne sais pas qui ou quoi, mais enfin voilà, si on vient là, c'est vraiment parce qu'on a quelque chose à y faire et que c'est facile. C'est vrai, voilà, c'est très facile. Avec Mathieu, on s'est rencontrés, on a fait une soirée pour la fête de la musique. On n'a même pas répété, voilà, toutes les choses. Enfin, on a dit tout à l'heure avec j'ai emprunté un truc ici, un truc là, et puis voilà, les choses elles se font ici. Le fond vert, j'ai été chercher à l'école du design parce que je travaille en dehors avec la photographe. Oui, non, mais ça fait partie de l'anti-design parce que je pense que si j'étais passé officiellement par un circuit pour le demander, je ne l'aurais jamais eu. On l'aurait jamais eu ou dans 6 mois. Donc, ici, il se passe des choses qui sont dues à la ville, mais qui sont, je ne pense, pas la volonté de la municipalité ou institutionnelle en tout cas, mais qui se font par oui, parce que s'il y a possible, quoi, voilà, avec les gens qui viennent là, ils savent comment les exploiter facilement, tout c'est possible.
Merci beaucoup pour tout ça, pour ces réponses franches et diligentes qui ouvrent la conversation entre nous tous. I wanted to thank you, Jean-Michel, for wrapping this up with a kind of ideal question about space, context, city, and capacity. And I also wanted to underscore that this event at the Grenoble Biennale is a starting point. This is our very first conversation. And the meeting ground is an alibi to catalyze relationships, to see productive overlaps between a multiplicity of international practices and contexts, and to nurture the relationships between ourselves and others in order to cast a fresh look at the work that we do, the reasons why we do it, and how it might lead to alternate urban imaginaries. So for our audience who joined us and participated in this experiment, this is the very first meeting between the participants in this ongoing potential collaboration, which will either rise to the occasion naturally through complicity and an affinity for each other's politics and practices, and a curiosity about each other's contexts. And what we hope will emerge over the next months are projects that invite our participants to travel to each other's contexts and participate in novel practices and urban instigations. I would like to thank everyone for participating in this conversation, for giving your time, your experience, your intelligence, and your stories to share with us. And we hope that the audience will check in again at the actsofurbanism.tube website, where the continuation of the experiment is going to carry forward until such a time where we can meet in person and collaborate embodied once again. I wanted to turn this over to Jennifer Bouygues to wrap up our session in French for our French audiences and participants, but I also just wanted to deeply thank everyone for taking part in this with us.
Merci Anya, merci beaucoup. Ces remerciements, nous te les retournons. On voulait te remercier avec mon collègue Jean-Michel Roux de l'Université Grenoble pour tout cet investissement dans ce lancement, comme tu l'as dit, de ce programme de recherche, de création. Ces remerciements vont aussi à tous les participants, que vous soyez derrière votre ordinateur en train de nous suivre, mais aussi tous les artistes, militants, habitants des quartiers de France, des États-Unis, qui vous lancez avec nous dans ce programme de recherche qui commence virtuellement et qui, je l'espère, continuera in situ. Entracte d'urbanisme, c'est donc une recherche expérimentale qui commence aujourd'hui à l'intersection entre art, design, performance, urbanisme, et qui prend le contre-pied, je dirais, d'une époque, comme je le disais tout à l'heure. Notre ambition, contribuer à étoffer l'appareillage méthodologique critique visant à comprendre les villes, et ce, dans le contexte de leur bouleversement, renouvellement permanent. Cette recherche, qui se fonde sur cette collaboration internationale, se veut à la fois incarnée, mais bon, et virtuelle aujourd'hui, et souhaite faire participer habitants, habitantes, concepteurs, chercheurs, artistes à l'analyse de leur milieu de vie, de nos milieux de vie. Voilà, les événements publics commencent aujourd'hui, des ateliers suivront, des performances. Elles seront, je l'espère, le support d'observation, de nos observations, de vos observations, si vous embarquez avec nous dans notre plateforme virtuelle. Et elles participeront, j'espère, ou par là même, au renouveau des modalités d'intervention urbaine. Je vous remercie toutes et toutes. Cette séance a été entièrement enregistrée. Elle sera disponible en ligne sur la plateforme YouTube et vous la retrouverez sur le site qui est indiqué sur votre chat, il me semble, qui est le site du site Internet. Encore une fois, je vous remercie. Nous étions en direct à la Biennale des villes en transition de Grenoble, 3e édition. Je vous souhaite une bonne fin de journée ou un bon début de journée si vous êtes à Grenoble. J'espère à bientôt.
Merci. Merci tout le monde. À bientôt.
Au revoir. Au revoir. Hey, Anya.
Hey, Emily.